Oh, am I here? Am I here already? All right. Hey, bullet catcher. Thanks. Thanks. Glad to be back. This is Pink Lemonade Spindrift for the working man. It has certainly been a bit of a whirlwind. I had a cross country drive, and then it's basically as soon as I got back in the Northeast, I then flew off to Mexico. 3 days of diving. Supposed to be 4 days, but we had one day that we lost due to weather. But that was okay because I caught. I don't want to say it's like the Montezuma's revenge because I wasn't really feeling terrible, but I definitely had some digestive issues. So it actually, from that standpoint, worked out okay. But the diving we did get in was really good. I didn't take my camera. I have an on. I have one of those little. I have an older GoPro that I've used to take underwater photos and video with, but I actually didn't bring it this time, mainly because sometimes, it was actually interesting because I heard divers remarking at this at the time as well, that it sometimes takes away from your actual enjoyment. Maybe not enjoyment's not right, well, but I guess it is. Basically, you can get so wrapped up in taking. I'm sure this happens not just underwater, right? But you find when you're trying to document everything, you're taking lots of videos, taking lots of photos, that you're not really experiencing the things so much because you're busy documenting the thing. I mean, it's what a lot of people lament, I guess, in general about, in concerts and whenever there's something live happening and you have a lot of folks they're using their phones, and you find that when you're you're using your camera, using your phone, whatever, and you find you're looking through that lens, you're doing it, but you're not actually enjoying it. Ian says probably best just to strap on the camera and forget about it. Yeah, I think that'd probably be one thing. I might look at that doing, because it is nice, and some people got some really amazing photos that I just kind of got to see. We didn't. One thing with divers is that I tend to find is everyone's really friendly. Didn't get anyone's information, so unfortunately didn't get to get copies of images they took. And there were some good ones, but even they were saying at certain points that they just either didn't take it on a particular dive or didn't really interface with it, because you just kind of lose the experience a little bit because you're looking through the lens. But it was good. We saw sharks. Really was on our last day. We saw three. I think they were all nurse sharks. Three nurse sharks. Two of them were napping under kind of shelves of coral, and one was swimming around. We did see a small. I think it was a small, like a sand shark, looked like. And the sharks are really neat because I was thinking, who was I talking to? I think I was talking to Jean-Luc from the Dungeons Key on Discord, and I had said that we saw sharks, and he sort of said that he would kind of panic if he saw sharks. But you don't feel that. And granted, we weren't seeing. Look, it wasn't a great white coming out of the water, and I don't know a ton about sharks, but I know enough about what the ones look like. I know I know a great white. You can make them out, and so I know what nurse sharks look like, and I know what, say, like the reef sharks look like. And one, I don't, I mean, not that there haven't been. I think I was gonna say no great whites in the Caribbean. I don't know if they ever go there or not. I think they're kind of cold water fish. But I think in Jaws 4 doesn't doesn't Jaws follow them in the Caribbean? I think there's God, that movie's so bad. But isn't there a moment where the shark they're flying, like the mother from Jaws, the wife, she's flying in one of the low airplanes, and the shark is actually tracking her from the water. Yeah. Oh, anyway, other than movie sharks, I don't know. They we're not in a spot where I think we're getting a lot of the sharks to be troublesome. I don't know if there are any bull sharks around, and I don't even know how troublesome the divers bull sharks are. But anyway, the thing is with the sharks is, I mean, it's weird to say because all the fish, obviously, they're in their element and they're beautiful and they're moving. But sharks, kind of like the way some birds, and I don't know, maybe it's a human thing or a cultural thing where we are always attracted to the predators, right? We don't talk about I mean, not that it's always true, but you tend to talk about the lion or the bear or the wolf, and we don't wax as poetic about the deer or the moose. But like some animals, like a moose or you see them like, and they don't seem particularly, they're a little bit clunky. I feel like a lot of humans are like that. We're kind of clunky. We get the job done, but we're not exactly fluid and graceful in the way that, you know, what's his name? Robert Howard would talk about Conan as having this sort of pantherish grace, right? We don't necessarily have that. Sharks, or at least for the most part, at least the ones in Tennessee, are just super fluid and graceful and sleek, and they just, so everyone's always excited to see them, and you don't see them very much. They're amongst the fish. You see tons of all kinds of cool little fish. Not little, they're not all, you know, I'm not talking about like all minnows. I mean, they're of different sizes, but it's like you see the shark, especially when they're kind of in motion, and they're cool. They're just cool animals. And I don't know if they would seem so cool if they were just, I don't know, eating coral or something, or just eating vegetable matter. But man, they are cool. I mean, there are other big fish that are not like, well, I think groupers are predators too, because they're kind of cool. I think we saw something. I don't know if it seemed like some kind of tuna, maybe. I'm not sure exactly. That's the other thing. I'm not great with the fish identification. My fish identification skills are lacking. So a lot of times I'll see and that's one unfortunate thing I'm having. If I had the camera, I could have taken a picture and then tried to look up the fish, but I was trying to remember what the fish was. There's some other decently sized fish. Saw a lot of rays, also really cool. And yes, there was those. Steve Irwin, I think, comes to mind. Even people on the boat were talking about Steve Irwin, because there was at least one. We saw one large stingray while we were snorkeling near where we were staying, the hotel we were staying. And it was, I know this, everyone exaggerates, like fishermen exaggerate about their catch, but I feel like I don't think saying it was from wingtip to wingtip, saying it was maybe 4 feet wide, maybe a little bigger, I don't feel like that's too much of exaggeration. It's big, and similar to the sharks, they just have a super fluid motion. And I think the thing is with those fish, or some of the fish, a lot of the fish, they're constantly moving. You know, they're sort of zigzagging around and zip zapping. Whereas these bigger fish, they're going and they're in a different mode, which I think lends to this their kind of cool factors. They're motoring, and these, or all the other fish are kind of zipping around. These are just cruising, just very, very, very cool. And the way that the way that the stingray kind of undulates its wings, I guess, I don't know what they're called, to move, also pretty darn neat. And you see some other stuff that's cool, like flounders. It's neat to see that when you see one, it's kind of half buried in the sand, its eyes are poking out. Seeing the huge, what is it they call it, spiny lobsters? They don't have claws, but they've got these big, I don't know what they call them. I guess they're antennae, but the bases are really thick. They're kind of like dual horns, and they're pretty long. And there were some big ones down there. And they're also, you usually see them in these crevices and underneath these shelves of rock and coral, and they're kind of hanging out. And you see one time there was 3 of them all kind of grouped together, and they're all looking around. Really, really fun. And even though it's been 6 years since my last dive, so there was that kind of nervousness about everything too, but that kind of fell away pretty quickly. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I took a refresher course before, not a course, but I took a refresher class with the fellow, the man who instructed us originally, and that kind of helped ease in. And then there's always I don't know if I'm just speaking in the void, if there's anybody who's interested in scuba or fellow divers or whatnot, but I didn't remember how much weight I needed. There's always this nervousness, because one of the things with scuba is it's a group activity, right? In the true sense of the word. I'm going on guided dives. I've never gone on sort of a free dive where you just kind of, or I don't know if they don't call them free dives. I think that's something else. Solo dives or kind of on your own kind of dives. We're always in a group. So there's a big thing of whatever you're doing can kind of impact the group. We're all following the guide. So if the guide is helping somebody, then you're kind of waiting around. And not that that's not bad necessarily, but I think it does lead to there being some, you can what is it? You can become kind of nervous, or at least that you're going to do something to hold up the group, or you're going to do something to slow the group down. So there's always a bit of self-consciousness, I guess. Hey, Magnus, self-consciousness for me anyway. That first dive, first day, first dive, especially now. I hadn't done it in 6 years. I kind of ask for maybe more weight than I need because I want to make sure to get down, because that's one of the things that can feel kind of embarrassing. You can feel self-conscious about is if everyone else is descending and you can't get down because you don't have enough weight. And it's an easy fix, but it's just something where you feel like, okay, everyone else is waiting on me while I monkey around with my weight. So that's one thing. And then I'm always conscious about my breathing technique. I don't feel like I have the best breath technique, though I think I should feel okay, because consistently when other people I saw kind of towards the end of the dive were, I could see them signaling how much air they had left, and I was consistently above them. I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm not as good as my wife is super good with her air consumption. And I think that's part of that is her. And part of that is the fact that I think women, for biological reasons, I think are better at air consumption than men. So she's really good. But when I saw the other people seem to be consistently heavier breathers or whatever than me, I was like, okay, great. Because that's really the key in scuba. If you want a nice long dives, you have to be able to sort of control your breathing. And that's kind of what you learn in the course, really, when you're scuba diving. It's all about that, getting your nerves stuff under control so that you're calm, you're not panicking, and all those things. You're not doing you're being very efficient with your movements, because it's all about air. It's all about, air, and obviously knowing the things to do, right? You have to, you go down to 80 feet. You don't skyrocket back up to the surface. You have to kind of take your time. And there's this there's this thing they call safety stop, where you stop and kind of re-equalize before you kind of pop up. He says the whole concept of rationing air is a showstopper. I hear you. It becomes kind of second nature. You don't have to look at it constantly. The thing is with the air is you don't have to look at it constantly. I like to look at it a few times when I'm starting, just to get a sense of how fast am I going through the air. And then, usually the guy, you just get prompted. The guide will look at you and do something like, symbol like kind of like this. And he's asking you how much air you have left. And so you look at your gauge, and then you say like, okay, I got 1500. That's kind of what I do. Some people do like in fives, 500, 1,000, 1,500. I think you could write, it doesn't matter pretty much how you do it. You send it back, and then you kind of don't have to worry about it too much. But you just want to, you obviously you don't want to have to leave the group early because you ran it. Or at least I don't want to, because you never know what you're going to see. And if you got to leave early because you've started to run out of air, then it just kind of stinks. I think the thing is to say, like, these dives are not super kind of technical. I think the thing is that maybe to just explain, I'm doing open water dives, meaning, I'm not going into caves. I'm not going into wrecks. I'm not going in anything weird. The water is right above you. And the funny thing is, like, especially in places like Cozumel, you're not diving even that far away from the shore. If worst comes to worst, you could swim the shore. You're not far. It's not like I know sometimes in different areas, I think like the Great Barrier Reef and some other places, like you could be pretty far kind of out there in terms of where you are on this huge reef, or whatever the reef is, where you're doing your scuba tour. But in the case of Cozumel, you are, to say you're almost a stone's throw from the beach is not even that far of an exaggeration. Sometimes you're looking at it like you're right there. So in the worst case, you can do that. Now, the other thing is that there are on Cozumel, there's like, I don't know, there's a ton of dive companies. There are lots of boats around. And like one of the things that they told us is, if you have to surface and for some reason you can't find anybody, like you're looking around, and again, just to go, you're gonna come up on the surface. You're not gonna be like thousands of miles from shore. Okay, you're gonna be looking around. You're gonna see Cozumel right there, but you look around, you can't find your boat. The boats are all on a certain frequency, so you can kind of wave over. A boat might come up to you and be like, who are you with? And you can tell them, oh, contact this thing. The boat we're on frequency 80. Contact them. And just to also clarify, we didn't have to do any of that. It never came up. I don't think it's something I think it would be something that maybe came up if you ran out of air early and you had to surface or something like that. But it's not like this is a common occurrence. Magnus asked if I ever heard of the guy who did a 600-foot dive just holding his breath. No. Oh my gosh. Herbert Nietzsche, 702 feet. Oh my goodness. No. And we didn't go anywhere near that. I think 80 feet was about the deepest that we went. And the other thing is that often the action is kind of on the shallower side. At least that I find. I mean, you could find there's lots of things to like, and I think some people like to go deep because it's kind of like, we're going, there's that kind of thing where you want to go deep to go deep. So I'm like, I want to go deep, like, okay, great. But at the same time, I don't think there's that much to see. I mean, there's some cool bits on the wall. I mean, there were some really neat swim throughs, these kind of coral swim throughs where they're not forming like a cave. You're not covered. It's not like you're going in a cave or a tunnel, but you have all these sort of shelves, and it's like you're going through a canyon, like a kind of, I don't know, a canyon with lots of very kind of, I don't know, rough, jagged kind of canyon, and you sort of swim through. And there were some of those that were pretty cool. I liked them a lot. I don't think my wife liked them quite as much as I did, but I like those things a lot. But most of the action in terms of the wildlife are really on top of the reef, and maybe along this kind of slopes, depending. Like the neat thing about Cozumel, it has all these different types of reefs all together. Whereas you go somewhere, we've been Roatan, which is off of is it Nicaragua? Gosh, I'm forgetting. But anyway, the Roatan has also reefs that are really close by, but all the reefs it's kind of the same type. Whereas I think part of what makes Cozumel special from a diving perspective is it has all these different topographies, different kind of types of reef. So you can have walls, and you can have kind of these kind of hills. You have these canyon kind of swim throughs. You have all these different sorts that are all there. So on a given couple of days of diving, you see a bunch of different types of kind of reef configurations. Whereas you go somewhere else, sometimes you're getting 3 days of diving, which is great, but they're all kind of the same. Save underwater exploration for their D&D characters. Hey, well, look, you got to do what's comfortable to you. Absolutely. I did not really imagine that I would become, and I'm not like a huge, I think I'm not, it's not like I dive all the time, but we really enjoy it. And I don't know if I would have thought that going in, but one of the things that when you go through the classes, if you ever decide to try it, is it's really getting over that nervousness stuff, because of course there are things that you have to be aware of. There are dangers and whatnot, but they're all pretty much under your control. I'm trying to think, like scuba, I think has a much more dangerous rap. I mean, it's like anything, right? If you go hiking, right, there are bad things that can happen, but they're generally under your control. That's not to mean that nothing bad ever happens to people who are hiking, but oftentimes when you read the stories of things going bad to hikers, there's either just, I don't know, almost like act of God stuff, like, oh, the worst storm in 1,000 years just rolled up on this guy in 10 minutes. It's like, well, that kind of stinks, but or they did something questionable. Like, he set off on a day where they said you shouldn't, or, he decided to stay late, or these kind of things like that. Whereas I feel like for us, going on guided things, we're not going to weird, crazy stuff. The things you have to do, I think, to dive safely and have fun, it's not that much, but it really is more about getting over the nerves part, because it's all about not panic. I mean, it seems weird. It probably makes it seem more dangerous than it is, but it's all about it's calmness. It's about having a Zen calmness, because the more Zen you are, the more relaxed you are, the longer you can stay underwater, and the more fun you can have, and all that. And that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I missed, unfortunately, I didn't get to see where these other divers caught it. And when we got there, we got around that area, it was over. But man, like where an eel and a shark almost seemed to kiss. Pretty cool. It was like basically under one of these shelves of coral, there was an eel and a shark, and they kind of came like nose to tip to tip. Anywho, all right. So I thought, one of the things that I did over the last, let me go back. Hold on a minute. I kind of set up, so I've been using Medium. All right. Well, that's new. Sorry, someone just decided to spam the chat. Ignore the spammer in the chat. Okay. One of the things I did was I set up Omnivore, kind of looking to replace Pocket or Get Pocket, whatever they're calling it. And I just wanted something. One of the things I got tired of with Pocket is I get it. They're all about, I'm not all about, right? I'm trying to get to the original. I don't know. Oh, there it is. I get that it's a service that you need to make some money, but I found that a lot of what I would consider to be sort of, to me, a kind of a core features were paywalled in a way. Magnus says, tell me your bot without telling me your bot. Yeah, exactly. A core feature where I felt like too many things I felt were core features were paywalled, and I wish that it would either be something, and I felt like I just felt like it wasn't maybe working as well for me in the ways I wanted to use it as I would like. I'm not averse for paying for things. I'll pay for things all the time, but it's kind of like trying to be a little bit smart about the kind of services I'm using and services I'm paying for. So I'm trying out Omnivore, which seems to be working well. I'm using it in addition with Reader. I'm trying to kind of get into my, since I've kind of quit Reddit, finding places to grab articles from has been more difficult. So what I did was I went and kind of started up an RSS feed reader again. And I spent, I don't know, maybe an hour, probably not that much. I put in, someone shared a bunch of links to a bunch of just general TTRPG blogs that had RSS feeds. And I went and put them all in and put them in the feed reader. So I'm going to be using that. And I'm basically been using Omnivore for when I find something that's interesting from just the whole full feed, saving them in Omnivore, which I can use here. So I'm going to start pulling from that. And of course, but obviously, if there's stuff that you guys find that obviously trumps not to, I probably should use a different word given the nature of the spammer there. Stuff you guys can find obviously will override the stuff I find here, but that will probably be my primary or co-primary source for materials. So this one I came across, I don't know if this is it's called, is it the blog called Dumpstat? So it's from dumpstatadventures.com. I thought this was kind of neat. This is a 5e, 5e/1 D&D. Yeah, there it is. 5e/1 D&D article, but I think there's some kind of neat things maybe we could take away. So I did kind of scroll through this, but I thought we could read it, and there might be some stuff. Obviously, I'm not usually playing. Well, not usually. I'm not playing at all. A 5e or whatever, the 1 D&D playtest. So I'm not going to use its original form, but let's see what we can find, because I think there might be some neat stuff here. So these are 80. This is called 80 generic regional effects for legendary monsters. And I'm going to try to grab all the links from these. So if you come back in the show notes or something, I will try to post these in there. And if I don't, remind me. I'll try to throw them in the forums as well. This is given a name. So this is under the category of homebrew. I don't get a name of the author, but it's on the dumpstatadventures.com site. Legendary monsters are more than just a sack of hit points, killer breath, and a hunger for adventures. They are more than just a single encounter, but rather a campaign arc. Their very presence seeps into the land, corrupting and changing it to fit a new habitat for them. When a legendary creature like a dragon makes its lair, the land changes to suit the legendary creature. So this is a concept I think I've talked about this before, but I really like it a lot, right? So you have a dragon in the land. How does the dragon shape the land? And I believe what we're going to be getting at is not only how it shapes it in terms of how it looks, but also in terms of maybe what is going on in this place. Oh, Magnus asking about Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, I'm going to do something with Baldur's Gate 3, Magnus. Absolutely going to happen. I haven't gotten around to it quite yet, but I believe, because I have my new desktop, or newish desktop at this point, which is, I can at least run it at reasonable rates. and probably be able to stream it. So yeah, I will do it. I would love if they had something kind of I don't know. I think it's just solo, right? I don't think you could do like online co-op, because I'd love to do like maybe make it a Patreon thing or something where I could do co-op with folks, because I really love the co-op gaming. I hope they come out with, gosh, there's one, they had those kind of when they were really, was this before, what am I thinking of? There were a bunch of these, I want to say Diablo kind of clones, action TTRPG clones. At one point there was a ton of them. I want to say maybe before Diablo 3, I don't know, somewhere in there. And there was a D&D one, and it was kind of fun. And my friends and I, we played it locally co-op, but I loved playing, I guess it was Diablo 3 co-op. Oh, BG3 has co-op. All right, nice. Well, I definitely will play it. I definitely will do a play on there. Oh, I will definitely, when I do get to it, I will definitely put on maturity warning. Okay. Legendary. So he said we're going to get to some regional effects. So these are things like a dragon or something similar is layering in the area. What does the land look like? But I believe these are going to be, if I'm recalling, we're going to get some maybe more active effects than just, oh, it's a red dragon, so it's hot. Bullet Catcher says it's too much if there are more private parts than Game of Thrones. Crossed the line. So this should be Baldur's Gate, and it should have been a collaboration with HBO. What the heck is that? From B&H? So we're talking about like private parts, and then there's this ad pops up. B&H, what are you doing to me here? What the heck is that stuff? What is that? Okay, I don't even want to know what that is, B&H. I can't even fathom what you're trying to show me there. All right, so here we go. Generic regional effects. Aberrant, number 1, Aberrant Master. All aberrations within 1 mile of the lair serve as the eyes and ears for the monster and can communicate telepathically with the monster. This, I think, is really cool, and it doesn't necessarily have to be aberrations. It's a massager. It looks like it's some kind of grip onto something. Okay, there you go. All right, phew. All right, we're on to Final Fantasy 14. All right. So this, I think, is a neat idea, and I think you could really extend this towards anything. So I'll have to make notes of this, because I think this would be awesome, and I think you could use this for all kinds of things, and it answers a question that is maybe a lot of folks hand wave it away because it's a game. When the monster you're seeking out knows you've come. I knew you were coming, and the players probably just go like, oh, okay. Did you? Well, I mean, I know we've been sneaking and doing all the stuff, pass without trace on 24/7, Leoman's tiny hut or whatever. Like, yeah, you knew we were coming? All right, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Sure. But this gives a kind of a cool thing, and you could even have like an emissary. And this is one of the things I think about this is I really like the idea. I guess I always think of Princess Mononoke, where you have these sort of animal gods or gods of animals, or like elevated, enlightened animals, and that they can kind of speak and do things, right? And so imagine that you have like the ape. I guess the apes could all talk, right? There wasn't one that could talk, but like the wolves could talk too. Or could only I don't want to get too in the weeds on the Princess Mononoke. I'll have to watch it again. But the idea that you could have, let's say, the wolf lord in its cave, but then it could have like this, it could look like other wolves in this, wherever its area could be being its eyes and ears, and can maybe even it could sort of take control or speak through it, or even just have an emissary through that. So you could, it fits a nice kind of theme thing. This thing's kind of the leader of the pack. It also shows that it's not just a large wolf, right? It's got something else going on. It gives you ways as a game master to help add context to the area. You're moving through this woods, and these wolves seem to be constantly trailing you or shadowing you, and they're sending out calls that's answered by a big call like further down the way, but that call always seems to be somewhat distant, right? Ooh, what's happening here? And then if one of those times the wolf kind of comes over and its eyes turn a different color and then it starts to speak to you. Like, that's some cool stuff. I really like that. I think that's some cool things. And I don't think it has to be aberrant. I mean, at least in in my world, it could be other reasons for that. But in your world, whatever. Another one, aberrant worms. All beasts within half proficiency bonus. I guess this is, I'm not going to worry too much about the mechanics. So forget the hypothetical, or the parentheticals, I should say. Aberrant worms. All beasts within some miles, could be a hex, right? Or 2 hexes. Maybe the number of hexes is dependent on the hit dice of the creature, whatever. Are infested with worms, making them completely inedible. As they die, they rise as undead or aberrant creatures within 24 hours. So you could think about, this would be a neat way to set up, I don't know, people like dragon liches and kind of undead versions of critters. This could be a neat thing. Or you could look at this and say, well, what if there's some really nasty, evil artifact buried here? What effect might it have, right? The Orcus's spear was stuck into the ground in the middle of here. What does that do? What would the Lord of Undead spear do to this area? Oh, well, this aberrant worms idea or something similar. Kind of cool. And it adds some issues, right? If you're wilderness wise, if you're hunting and trying to use that for food while you're traveling, well, not only are you not going to have the food, but it's also going to be adding that context, because you're going to be seeing these worms, which I would definitely describe as being maggoty and not like, oh, it's just a worm. It's like, no, these are nasty worms. Maybe when you're cutting them, it's like it's already rotting from within. And then if you just kind of leave it, we're like, oh, and then you leave it for some period of time. If you're still around, it suddenly gets up and it kind of wobbles off sort of in undead form. Or maybe you then find it again and you can tell this is the deer that you killed before, and then now it's back. So it's adding that context and really reinforcing the fact that there is some kind of undead, or I guess aberrant, depending on which way you want to go with it, power in the area. Hey, Frederick. Yeah, vacation is over. Indeed. Now we have acidic water. Any sources of water within some distance of the lair are transformed into acid after 1 hour of being exposed to the monster's magic / presence. So if you have, what is it, a green dragon? What is it, black dragon? Green? Is green dragon acid? Which dragon's acid? I can't remember. Anyway, you might have a creature like that. Maybe it lairs in the source of a river or stream, and it turns the water acidic. Could be kind of cool. The passing through is kind of interesting too, because if they encounter the stream on one side of the lair and then the other side and suddenly it's acidic, I mean, obviously that would help you figure out where the lair is, because the more acidic it gets, the closer to the lair you are. Another one is always watched. Creatures within 1 mile of the monster's lair sometimes feel as if time has stopped or large portions of time have passed. Okay, Magnus is black dragon assassin. Thank you. I can't. Some of the dragons I can't. I think, was it green dragon's poison? I can't remember. So I like the idea of always watched, though I'm not sure if how always watched translates to time has stopped. But I like the idea that it feels watched. Another way, right? Context. If you're in an area, maybe you don't know if you're in a hex crawl mode and you're, as a GM, we know the adventure of the hex where there's the lair of some creature. The party doesn't know it yet. Maybe they're just moving through. And then they feel that watched. Well, that's a great way of adding tension. It also can be that explainer. Oh, why isn't when we get to the lair, the dragon's going to be aware of us? Well, because there's some effect on the land and it knows you're there. And the reason, and you knew that it knew, or at least you were given a cue that it knew you were there because you felt like you were being watched. And if you choose to ignore that, then you do so at your peril. An aura of apathy. Creatures within 1 mile of the monster's lair experience a sensation of apathy and lack of the will to go on. The sensation grows stronger the closer the creatures come to the monster's lair. And upon first seeing the monster, a creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or fall prone and become incapacitated when they first see the monster. This effect lasts until the end of their next turn as they are overcome with feelings of hopelessness. So I like this one a lot, but you got to be really careful with these because, this is the thing where I feel like people go, and obviously this is written for 5th edition, so this isn't necessarily, they're writing this for what's out now. So this is not even an old school thing, but just, you may end up being close to the monster, you just roll and you just kill over and fall unconscious. If it's just a monster that's going to kill you, that seems a little bit rough. Now, of course, there's usually steps you could have taken beforehand. I get it. I'm not trying to say everything should be sugarcoated, but it's kind of a tough one. But I like the idea of just having that power. And what I like to do with these kinds of things, it was something like this. I don't usually have it work on the players. Like, I won't have the players collapse for lack of will to go on. I'll talk about how it's tough, but I like to do what I guess I would call it the Atreyu and Ortax conundrum, or just that. I don't know. It's not even a why did I call it a conundrum? It's not a conundrum. The Atreyu and Ortax situation. They're in the swamps of, I forget what they call it. And I guess spoilers for the Neverending Story from like 1984. Sorry about that. Atreyu and Ortax are in this swamps of, I don't know, dread, swamps of, it's sadness, I think it is. And Atreyu, in this situation, Atreyu is the PC, Ortax is the NPC. Atreyu's slogging along. He doesn't like it. He's feeling the hopelessness, but he can keep moving. Now, he may starve. He may run out of water before he gets anywhere. Like, all these things may happen to make Gamort could kill him before he gets where he wants to go. But I'm not going to have he's not going to succumb to the hopelessness. Now, Ortax, spoilers, does succumb to the hopefulness and drowns in the swamp, or sinks down into the swamp. And that's how I tend to run these things. And if you're a party that, as I often do, will kind of load up on hirelings, here's where you can make some nice, fun rolls, and all kinds of hilarity can ensue when the similar thing happens with half the hirelings standing stock still in the swamp of sadness as they're sinking lower and lower into the gloop as the party may be scrambling to try to save them. So I wouldn't have something like this affect the PCs directly, but I would have it affect their hirelings. Magnus said that, okay, green dragons are indeed poison. That's hardly the most interesting about them. And Magnus also says they don't know if 5e kept this concept, but it's Draconomicon, but in earlier editions, there's this concept of the dragon mound/mount. Oh, I'll have to look that up. I don't recall that one. Magnus is basically the corpse of an ancient worm, or the oldest, biggest type becomes a landform that causes magical effects in the areas around them. Ooh, I like that a lot, Magnus. I'll have to look that up, but that's very cool. So we have the Aura of Apathy, now the Aura of Charm. Creatures have advantage on charisma checks while in the lair. Well, that's not bad. Aura of Decay. So we have basically different auras, right? So Charm, Apathy, Decay, Paranoia, or Spirit. And like I said, I would allow I would tell the players that this kind of effect is pervasive in the air, but I wouldn't have it dictate their actions and make them roll saves against it. But I would have used the hirelings to really show the effects of these particular auras. Burning winds, billowing hot winds rush within the area of the monster's lair, sometimes forming superheated twisters that rip and tear through the area. This obviously made me think of red dragons a lot, and it makes a lot of sense that you would have those. And another one's bursts of color, which is just colors are extra bright, and anything white, gray, or black is instead magically turned into a random color. I might skip that part. I don't know what that's. I mean, I guess it's whatever you like, but I like the idea that the extra brightness on the colors. Carnage and Onslaught. The Calm Emotion spell and similar magic automatically fails if cast while in the lair. Okay. I don't know if that's kind of a niche thing, but it'd be interesting to think about what else you could do. I would probably do some kind of, instead of that, but I remember this is for 5th edition, so they don't really use it too much, is maybe have a really negative modifier on reaction rolls so that just things tend to be towards Carnage and Onslaught. Cavern Maze, twisting tunnels underground form complicated mazes that can lead creatures astray. Okay, well, I mean, you could just work that into the lair itself. Celestial Respite. It's like basically under a Hallow spell effect. I like that a lot. Celestial Waters, similar, but waters. Charmed by Violence. Intelligent creatures within some area of the monster's lair are prone to complementing the monster's terror and heinous acts. Again, I would have that work on the hirelings, probably not the players. Churning currents, constant vigilance, a coral reef guards, coral reef toxins, a corn maze, dead voices. I like that a lot. Decaying plants. So you can see here, there's lots of kind of environmental things. So what I really like about this in general is I'm not going to read through all of these, but it's ways of adding context to a lair, which is cool because often we kind of want players to at least be maybe not curious about them. You put a layer on the map. you've gotten your hex map, you've thrown a layer in there. You kind of hope that your players are at least, maybe they won't go there necessarily, but you want to kind of make its presence known. It's not just a spot, and if they don't search and search in hex, they don't ever find it, right? Oh, it's the secret thing on the map, so they got to keep searching and searching. Well, if they're just moving through, what are the chances that going from this town A to place B that they're going to search this hex? Well, yeah, that's true. They might not. And I think that can be a big disadvantage, maybe, that people look and say, well, like, I don't want to do like that because I want them to find the lair. I want them to do that. Well, we don't want to force them to the lair. I don't want to do that. But I want to at least put it in play. Well, how can I do that? How can I put that lair in play? How can I make it something that might be discovered or make the party interested, intrigued in the potential of it? Well, if they enter an area and it's got one of these effects layered on top of it, right? And these effects that are clearly, and I would definitely look, if someone wants to do detect magic or some other way is there some kind of magical influence, I would totally give them that and say, like, yes, there is. It's pervasive in the very air itself. And I would definitely be something that, hey, that these kind of things like power, part of that session 0 kind of how does the world work sort of questions is like, what happens when powerful monsters enter a space? Well, this is what happens. Okay. So Magnus says this dragon mound or mount is called the Dragon Graveyard or Guarded Area, and it's in the 3.5 Draconomicon. I used to have that somewhere. I might still have it. I'll have to try to check that out. Oh, and he was mixing it up with Skyrim mounds and Dragon Mount from Wheel of Time. Yeah, and that happens to me all the time, Magnus. Do not feel bad. I am constantly mixing stuff. I have the utmost respect for folks that just can rattle off addition and whatever different rules. I am always having to double and triple check where my information is coming from. So you have a lot of these, and they keep going, and I think they had some. I like the idea of these planar portals too, which is really cool. Oh, and that's it. Okay, I thought they had some that were specific, but I guess not. But those are all really cool. So I wouldn't necessarily. So some of them that have, I think I kind of talked through the way I would use these, but I would just think that adding these to how you think about your lairs. And yeah, not every monster should have this, right? Oh, an owlbear's cave, you're not going to have these effects, in my opinion. And you can, do what you want. If you love owlbears and you want to have a certain thing, that's great. And the other thing is, if you do decide to do that, what you should is be consistent. Like write down, hey, red dragon lairs have these kind of effects associated with them, depending on the power of the dragon and whatnot. And that way, players can build up a knowledge base. Oh, okay, was a red dragon and we saw those, what do they call them, burning, we felt the burning winds when we were near a red dragon lair. Interesting. So then sessions later, could be years later, some other area where a red dragon, maybe you rolled a random event or some kind, and red dragon has now made their home in a place near to somewhere the players are going or where they are. Guess what? You can have someone run in and say, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what's happening in the fields, but I just had this weird burning wind, some kind of the twister of hot superheated air came flying through my field. And guess what? The players might go, we know what that is. That is a dragon, and it's probably a big one. So we probably need to deal with that somehow. So all these things can help world building. They help build context. They can be in a sense, they could be adventure hooks on their own. Hey, you're in the town. It's like fall or winter, and yet you're getting these ripping, burning winds coming through. That itself is kind of like, that's something maybe we should discuss. Maybe we should figure out what's going on. And then that becomes some knowledge that they can carry forward into other situations. And then even then, maybe from that, I like the idea that these things would it didn't let me exit really quick. I like the idea that these different effects would be consistent in a way so that you could try to reason if a red dragon had, burning winds, Maybe the other dragon, what was it, a black dragon with acid? I mean, then you get to the acid. Oh, the stream is suddenly turned acidic. It burns, right? Or you're like, oh, acid. Then a party could go, if this kind of creature does, then maybe it's something like this, right? You kind of can start to make at least guesses on what is the cause of certain effects, which I think is always a good thing. So that was 80 generic regional effects for legendary monsters. Thank you very much. What else we got? Let's see. So this one came up. I'll go to the original. Is it coming? There it is. This is posted to Don John Lands. Regular entourage, hirelings, and henchmen. All right, so this, I guess they're reposting something from 1984. So this article is posted by Stephen Wendell, but they're reposting. So this is the following article is from L'Avant-Garde newsletter of the East Middleton War Games Association, number 65, July 1984. So a little blast from the past here. So let's see what the wisdom was in July 1984. This article was called Regular Entourage by Fenster. Jinx likes to have a lot of sword and spearmen as a regular entourage. He says it's better to have more steel on the target. Beowulf doesn't like to have any hires at all. He says his two-handed sword is steel enough. I like to have a fighter or two to protect my skin when the going gets rough. Hazard lets us roll the dice for our hirelings, so it's more fun when I can't throw a spell. Plus, when one of our characters is killed, we can always take over a hireling or a henchman. All right, so this is all basic, good advice. So I'm guessing that Jinx, Beowulf, and this person who's writing Fenster are players, and those are their characters, and then Hazard is the GM. Bookcatcher says they were 1-year-old eating smashed peas. Well, there you go. There you go. Smashed peas. We used to advertise for positions and role play the encounter and haggle for the fee and all that. But after 1 or 2 times, it wasn't much fun. Now we just go to the 9 of Pentacles, which I guess is a tavern, and buy ale for potential hires. We tell Hazard what professions we're looking for and how many. Then Hazard tells us how many there are and how much they cost according to his system. See below. We still do some haggling. And I think this is an important point. And it's always funny because especially in kind of OSR, sort of NSR fields of discussion, people find themselves, like people have been talking about this stuff, right? You can go on some forums, sure, and there are people probably asking right now, what do we do with hirelings? It seems boring. We don't want to role play. Is it okay if we don't role play, or should we role play out? Should we role play out the hiring process with hirelings? It's my group doesn't like it, or I don't like it, or whatever, right? And look, people, we're not going over new ground here. People have been coming up with different ways to do it. So they, here in 1984, right, talking about, well, our group doesn't really love to get into a deep, doesn't find it worth it anymore. And I would probably agree with this too. Like some of these things, yeah, if you have a really interesting particular person out there, it can be fun to role play, but sometimes you're really just looking for some hired help. And it's much like if you go to a, I don't know if definitely in places like Houston, if you go by a garden center type store, there are some day laborers who are hanging about. You can probably find, I'm sure there are groups finding, I could go in different parts of Brooklyn. I just haven't ever done it, looking for, day laborers. And maybe the first time you go looking for some day laborers to help you on a particular project, maybe you get really in depth on trying to figure out their personality profiles and whatnot. But I'm guessing that after a few times of doing that, you kind of will just roll up on a station. You'll be like 5 guys, right? I need 5 guys for, I don't know, lawn work, whatever. And then 5 guys hop into your back of your truck or into their truck and fight, whatever it is. And then you do it. And by the same thing, right? It's nice to go on the in-depth stuff, but ultimately after a while, it's probably a sister thing. Like, I just need 5 guys. Right? I don't need to, we need to make this the whole session. Like, I just need 5 guys kind of thing. And whereas we might be grappling with the same issue, like, these guys have already figured it out eons ago. And I'm sure people figured it out before, 10 years before. Some people had put out their own methods for doing this too. In any case, so they go and they spend some money probably, and then if they want it, they'll get some price rates, and then they can haggle if they want or not. Dwarves and elves for hire are rare, but we can usually find 1 or 2 human types or halflings. we want. And there's never a shortage of men-at-arms unless there's a war or something, like the time a horde of demons got loose from the great halls and rampaged the countryside. Good times. Higher rates by armor type. All right, here we go. This is interesting. To figure the cost to retain the services of a hireling, Hazard takes 1/10 of the XP required for the hire's level. All first level human and halfling types cost 100 GP minimum. Men-at-arms, 0 level, are 50. First level dwarves and elves are 200. That's the usual rate, which we call chain. Double the rate is plate, +1 reaction, and half is called leather, -1 reaction. You can negotiate for even lower rates with a -2 reaction. Then it's called jack, as in I didn't get jack. I like it. Any bonus money or benefits is called shield, +1 if consequential. If you really want a particular hireling for some reason, like a fighter looks especially strong, you can pay double plate for an extra bonus. So it's interesting that I don't know why they did this. It's kind of cool. I like the idea of having it like armor, but I have to say, it seems a little bit weird because it just doesn't seem to be related at all to what they're wearing. This has nothing to do with and we're going to get below that they're buying armor and equipment. So it's not about the fact that, hey, anything about that. It's just, they just like to use kind of armor class or at least armor names for the hiring process. So I guess you would say, I'm going to play, I guess if you go the full month, if you want to go the biggest, you would say, I will pay double plate and a shield for that. Or like, I'm not sure about this guy. I'll just try. I'm going to offer him jack, which is just interesting. But it's cool. We have to buy armor and weapons for hires, of course, plus equipment and rations. We also pay room and board, and hirelings get half shares of the treasure. We usually don't have to pay guild fees for magic users and thieves, but a potential hire might haggle for it, and that gets expensive. So interesting thing here, right? You got to pay room and board. You get everyone's getting half shares, but they're not paying a day fee. It doesn't seem like they're paying a per diem. They're paying, basically, it seems like they're paying a hiring bonus, basically. Or is it? I think maybe it seems like it's just a hiring bonus, right? We're going to pay 200 to join us and then half treasure. But it seems like everybody's getting half shares. So your Link boys, your whatever you're taking in, they're all getting half shares. So that's going to add up in shares pretty quickly, if I'm reading that correctly. Dwarves and elves expect to be paid plate, and they will react negatively for lesser offers. So let's just get an idea of what plate. So plate. So if it's a first level dwarves or elves, right? Because I'm guessing it seems like they're playing BX in terms of having, right? There's races class going on here, or species is class. They don't talk about a dwarven fighter, whatever the thing, dwarven elf and halfling. So it seems to be there in BX. So because the dwarves and elves in particular, dwarves too, I guess, are a little bit front loaded, right? They have higher XP requirements. So theirs is 200. So if you want, they're asking this to be paid plate. So that's double the rates. So that's 400. So 400 gold for a dwarf or an elf, first level dwarf or an elf. Pretty steep. I mean, that means, you're looking at this rate. Because one of the things I guess you can see from the way they're doing it is everybody costs 100 gold pieces minimum. That means that right out of the box as a first level venture, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to be able to hire anybody, or you're going to be able to hire like one guy, because maybe after you've equipped, you start. What is it? I think the max amount of gold you could start with is 120, right? Am I thinking about that right? 3d6 times 10. Or 180, I guess, 180 gold. And you're going to get some, but that's max. You're probably going to end up with about 100 gold. You're going to average out at about 100 gold, 110 gold, somewhere in there. 100, it would be 10.5. So I guess the average would be 105 gold. Once you've gotten your own supplies, food, your equipment and, armor, weapons, whatever, you're going to have something less than that. So even if you have 5 guys, you pull all that together. If you have 100 gold after it all, that's probably pretty good. I mean, there are some. I know there'll be some situations where, like, the magic user is not spending a lot on armor or anything, and you might have 90 gold left. But I guess bottom line is, even if that magic user has 90 gold left, maybe you can then get 2 hirelings. Of course, that's not even, and that might mean that you're spending all your money, which you generally don't want to do, because you may not. It may take you a while to get situated. You may need to come back in town to rest, things like that. And so you need to pay for room and board. So you don't want to just leave yourself with nothing in reserve. So it's definitely the way this is working out is you're paying a lot of upfront costs. Now you're not paying a per diem, it seems like, but since you're paying that upfront, you're probably going to need to do a couple adventures, at least an adventure, maybe a delve. I will say at least a delve or 2. Find some kind of treasure, come back, and now you have like 1,000 gold, and they're like, okay, now we can start to hire people and go after bigger loot. All right, on to negotiation. After you make an initial offer, Hazard rolls 2d6 on this table. He gives us a bonus. He gives a bonus for really good offers, plate and shield, high charisma, and the PC's reputation for treatment of hirelings, or a penalty for bad offers, etc. This is basically a reaction kind of roll. So then you go from offended, which doesn't mean they walk away, but any further negotiations are at a negative. Either they refuse, you can haggle, they accept, or they're pleased, which gives them a +1. It seems like offended should really just be they walk away. Otherwise, I guess it's weird because here's haggles. So here you get a negative, but it seems like you could still haggle. So it's almost like if you can haggle for haggling and you can continue to make offers if they're offended, then it seems like you should be able to continue to make offers if they refuse. So I'm not sure if those, why that's maybe written like that. But because I would probably have haggles, maybe refuses. I'd probably put this penalty on refuses, and then offended, which is just kind of they walk away. They're gone. But that's just me. If the prospect is offended, he just can't be persuaded, and he might spread rumors about you. Okay. Well, then why do you get a -1 to further checks? I'm not sure. You take a penalty on any other negotiations for a month or so. I see. Is that with just them? Oh, I'm not. Okay, this is interesting. So if someone's offended, then you get penalized on any other negotiations for a month. I guess not with that person, but in that place, they've kind of soured the place on you. If he refuses, you might get him back in the game by doubling your offer. Okay. So refuses, you still have an angle to get back in, but it's usually not worth it. In the case he wants to haggle, he might make a counteroffer, or he could say no, usually politely, and wait for you to make a better one. This is the time to throw in shield, a bonus, so you get another roll at the table. Okay, so that makes a little bit more sense. That one's kind of brutal, but I guess it means that the more you kind of lowball people, the higher your chance of being offended, which is going to hurt all your chances going forward. So it definitely, in this case, it kind of pays to be generous if you can. Because if you get, if you can even just get a +1 on your roll, you can't get offended, right? Because it's a 2d6, and if you get a +1, then you'll end up at 3. So then the worst you can get is a refuse. Shield. Shield is a bonus offered in addition to the usual rate, plate, chain, leather, if offered up front. It usually gets you a +1 bonus on the first negotiation roll. After the first roll, you can offer shield to convince the hire, get another roll, but you get no bonus. Aha, that's interesting too. So you want to, if you really want it, you probably should offer it up right away. Because if you don't, you can offer it to get another roll, but then you don't get the bonus from it. So here, what are some examples of shield? Good question. We're going to get some. And those are more gold, gems, jewelry, paying guild fees, or a magic item. Even a potion will do. Bonus gold, gems, or jewelry should be at least 20% of the base offer. Offering a small trinket as a bonus or saying you equip all your fighters with plate band shield is called a wooden shield if it's true. Oh, the lingo's great. It's good. You might get another roll, but not good enough for a bonus to the roll. If it isn't true, it's called a straw shield. Oh, interesting. The same as promising extra treasure or any other future thing. Offering a straw shield gets you a -1 penalty on the negotiation table. This is because the initial payment usually goes to the hire's family for safekeeping until he comes out of the dungeon. It serves as his estate if it doesn't make it. So I really like this a lot. It's a nice thing because there's a meta reason for this, right? You don't want your party to just offer up all kinds of things that they're all backloaded. Oh, well, when you come out, or at the end of the day when you come this, right? It's all, like, okay, great. So you've set up the kind of mad things like, look, you can offer kind of future rewards all you want, but yeah, it's not going to help you. Like they know. And one of the reasons, or the fictional reason for this, the reason in the world why that stuff is not as lucrative or not as appealing as you might want it to be, is because of this. They have families, they got parents, siblings, maybe their own families, and this goal and stuff is right. They're going off on doing dangerous things with you. So they're not working a job, they're not farming the land, they're not doing these things. So not only do they have to keep their families going, but it also means that if the worst comes to worst out in the world, and that often happens, that they've made an estate for themselves. And so you think about those high prices, right? 100 gold, 200 gold. It's a lot in terms of, in terms of your how it compares to, say, what would be the wage, what would be the yearly income of like just a villager type. That's probably 100 gold. It's probably a lot. I mean, probably 100 gold could probably get you a long ways. And you think like, wow, that's expensive. Well, what you're saying about this world is that, yeah, going out there, it's dangerous, but it's potentially lucrative, but it's so dangerous that they need some bit of it up front. And that's why. And that's why they're probably more likely to hold fast on it, because they know it's dangerous enough that these promises of things off in the future aren't going to feed their families if they don't come home. When we were starting out and didn't have much treasure yet, we mostly paid chain, but now we usually have enough gold to pay plate. Our reputation for good pay and fair treatment is pretty good, except for Jinx. He's generous with shield, but his hires have a habit of, quote unquote, giving up the estate. Oh, loyalty. Initial loyalty. When the hire accepts an offer, the DM rolls 3d6 for the hireling's loyalty score. Add any bonuses or penalties from the PC's charisma and the negotiation roll. The DM keeps hireling's loyalty score secret from the players, as it should be. Testing loyalty. A hireling's loyalty is tested at the end of every adventure after treasure has been divided and hirelings have been paid their shares. Bonuses and penalties based on treatment during the adventure, +1 or -1, and extra treasure, +1 apply. If you didn't get any treasure to distribute, -1 of the roll. You get a +1 if the hire is the same alignment as you, and a -1 if the hire's alignment is diametrically opposed to yours. You probably won't know it. Okay, so this is interesting. So they seem to be using maybe the 9. So they're not using just chaos neutral law, I don't think. Or maybe they are. I guess I can't tell. Because I was going to say, it sounds like they're not if they're saying diametrically opposed, because aren't they all? But you have neutral there in the middle, which isn't diametrically opposed to chaos or law. So I guess it's possible they could be using the 3-point system. Hazard also tests loyalty whenever a hireling is faced with great danger or some moral dilemma concerning the employer, the party, or the mission, for example. Test loyalty with a d20 roll. Rolling the loyalty score or less means his loyalty goes up +1. Higher than the loyalty score means his loyalty goes down -1. Broken loyalty. If the loyalty score ever drops below 11, the hireling's loyalty is broken. This means that if the initial loyalty score, 3d6, is 10 or less, the hireling probably won't stay with you after the first adventure unless you manage to get some bonuses on the loyalty test. When a hireling's loyalty is broken between adventures, he leaves. Role play according to circumstances. If loyalty is broken in the dungeon or some dangerous wilderness, the hireling's morale drops to 10, and he will leave as soon as it's safe. A neutral hire might commit treachery if he could take advantage of a situation. An evil one probably will commit treachery just to be mean. The neutral one, that sounds kind of, so I guess it is a 3-point alignment. But man, neutral. Why are you doing that to me, neutral dog? Come on, why you got to do that? Saving the hireling's life automatically gains +1 directly to his loyalty score. Suicide missions, asking to do something against his alignment, or some behavior on the PC's part that is dramatically opposed to the hire's alignment will automatically break loyalty. Okay. So again, good stuff. It seems like we haven't gotten to, I guess, loyalty in the moment, like something horrible happens. But this is that ebb and flow of the loyalty. So as opposed to kind of an immediate reaction like fight or flight, this is those ebb and flows, the kind of long-term movements, the loyalty score. And as the referee, as the campaign or the adventure is going on and things are happening each time, these kind of little decision points come up, these little bits, you will Oh, it's up. Oh, it's down. Oh, it's up. Oh, it's down. But they reach that breaking point. I guess it really maybe well, I guess it does matter. I was going to say it doesn't matter until the end of the adventure, but no, it does matter because you could be somewhere at camp, wake up, and 3 hirelings are going. Why? Because they broke their loyalty, and maybe the neutral one took advantage to grab something extra on the way out. Maybe the evil one, let loose the party's horses, or something mischievous or wicked on their way out the door, kind of thing. All right, now we have henchman. A hireling whose loyalty score reaches 20 becomes a henchman, 1 adventure minimum. A henchman is a trusted lieutenant to the PC. His loyalty is no longer in question, and he doesn't have to check morale anymore. A hireling has to pass a morale check when things are looking grim or run away. Okay, so there we go. So they do mention it in brief. A henchman follows the PC in all cases, except extreme cases as above, suicide missions, etc. A henchman gets a full share of the treasure, and he pays his own way, room, board, etc. He's a lot like, but not quite like, another PC. The player has full control over the henchman's actions, but don't abuse the privilege, like sharing magic items and stuff like normal second PC rules. So basically, that guy's stuff is his stuff. You can't swap out like you might want to. It seems like that's what they're saying. Experience points. Henchmen and hirelings only get half XP. Hazard doubles the number of PCs, then adds the NPCs, then divides the XP by that number. The PCs get 2 times the amount, and the NPCs just get 1. Great. So we have the notes here. The 9 of Pentacles has been mentioned in some other articles. It's the group's local sword and board, which is cute. Cool. Well, that was a fun little read. I like a lot of the details in here. I will add these to the show notes. I'm trying to think. There's this. What was I going to say? I like it. I was going to say the henchman is really interesting, and I like it. I like what it does. So they have to go on 1 adventure minimum. You can't roll 3d6 and get some bonuses and get up to 20 and be like, oh, they're an instant henchman. No instant henchman. They got to go on an adventure. But if you can get them up to 20, which is going to take some doing, a little bit of luck, maybe a lot of luck in terms of what you start off with. You start off with 11. That's a lot higher road to get to that 20 than if you start at 17. But wherever you start, and once they get there, they kind of swear. Maybe you can make it neat. I mean, this is somewhere you can really kind of have fun with the role playing and what it means, right? They swear oaths to you, or they've taken a blood oath and whatever. And now they're here. Now what does it mean for the player? Well, on the one hand, they're getting more treasure. And the interesting thing here is that the treasure that they're getting doesn't give them more XP. They're still only getting half XP. But now it's less efficient in a way because they're getting double the treasure, but half the experience points. So they're only benefiting from half the treasure they get. Maybe that's the way to say it. But so they're getting a full share now. And then but on the flip side is now they're kind of under the PC's control. The PC, and of course you could do what you want. Some people give hirelings PC control already. I don't. So this might be an interesting thing to do. I could see kind of servicing this for my players and saying, hey, if you can get their loyalty up here, then I'll put them under, they'll become kind of yours, right? Subject to, like you said, subject to kind of the abuse factor, but you can give them orders that they will carry out. They're kind of your man, right? They are yours. But again, there's some luck involved. All kinds of stuff can happen. But I really like. I guess what I like about it is that it's a carrot, I guess, to treating your hirelings well, and you can build up a little retinue of folks, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to be a special class. You don't have to do anything. You just got to kind of treat them well, maybe be a bit lucky. Ultimately, just treat some folks well, and they will return. The favor will be returned to you. So I like that a lot. Now it's cool. Now it's from 1984. Let's see if I can get one more in here. Let's see what looks good. A lot of people have been running stuff, these kind of Zelda. I've seen there's a lot of articles on people sort of analyzing, or I don't know if analyzing is the right word. Sometimes I don't find they've been not that much analysis really going on, but basically looking at the Zelda games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and pulling different things out of it. I remember I looked at an article a little while back that was on the same kind of vibe of like, look what Tears of the Kingdom is, how the worlds work in Zelda, and seeing how that relates to how worlds work in terms of adventures. Because one thing that the Zelda games really encourage, they really demand, is a lot of exploration, getting out there in the world and just figuring things out and doing it, which in terms of kind of OSR gaming was something we always want from our players, right? How do we want that the worlds are there, explore, get out there. We're going to hex crawl. We're going to open up this big map and just go. And then, sometimes the players, it's a struggle of, I think we often come across of, well, how do we get the party to go? How do we get them to kind of self-actualize? How do we get them to take those first steps and just, instead of us having to lay out narrative in front of them, to kind of go and create their own narratives? And the Zelda games kind of accomplish this. You spend all kinds of time just wandering around the world. So trying to figure out, well, how does this work for the Zelda games, and how does it work for us, and things we can learn from their kind of cross-pollination of this kind of computer game design with tabletop game design thing has been interesting. So let's see what they have to say about it. 3-point planning, or how to session prep like a Zelda game. This is posted by Craig McLean. McLean, give me back my detonators. Have you ever wondered why exploring Hyrule in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is so fun and rewarding? How did the developers create such an engaging and enormous world? After many hours in both games, I have broken down the wisdom of The Legend of Zelda into one concept: 3-point planning. What is 3-point planning? 3-point planning is preparing 3 choices for the characters to engage with. There are always exceptions, like at the beginning or end of an adventure. Yet by giving the player choices, you give them the power to create their own story. From the PC's current location, what are 3 possible locations they can travel to? In the wilderness, this looks like monuments and fantastic locations discovered between destinations. The Legend of Zelda does this through the use of shrines, towers, NPCs, caves, enemy camps, etc. A D&D game might include an archway, an obelisk, or stone circle that the PCs come across while traveling. Think of a couple of small details that can give more flavor to the situation and location. How old is the space? What condition is it in? And what has changed over time? Small details described well can go a long way towards giving the world a sense of history. Write down some ways that PCs can learn some secrets or clues about their current mission. What can they learn about their enemy? Do they have any reluctant allies? What events tie the PCs to the story? Other secrets can be about the history of the world. You never know when you need a nugget of info to reward a player for exploring your world. So I think what it seems to be getting at is, if you've played the Legend of Zelda games, the newer ones, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, right? Tears of the Kingdom. You can look out over this huge open world and you'll see things in the distance. And like they're saying, you see a shrine, you see one of those, what do they call them? I forget the names of those towers, something. And it gives and it's not that you just get 3, depending, you probably can, wherever you're standing, you can probably turn around and see more than that. But you get these things that can then be a destination. Like the towers, and I think, and what's the Assassin's Creed? I haven't played Assassin's Creed in forever, but I remember the original one, and maybe did I play some of Assassin's Creed too? I can't remember, but you had those towers, and you could climb up the tower and you dive off, and they would give you like a more area the map is, but you could always see them kind of from a pretty good distance. It gave you something to aim towards. Like I don't know what I need to do necessarily, but I see that tower over there, so I have something I can make for that tower, kind of thing. Magnus says, so Hexcrawl is basically a 6-point planning system? Could be. But I think the challenge is, and this is where sometimes I find these comparisons get a little bit dicey, is because Zelda, the game, is really designed to give you these vistas where you can see everything and really look out there, and all these things are the nature of the world, and everything's kind of pops out at you. Oh, there's a tower. Oh, like that might not work in the way you envision or visualize your game. If I'm envisioning and I have some big forest between me and something else, like I'm not going to necessarily have or want to have something popping up. It's like there's a dark wood, right? I don't want, and maybe the nature of the wood precludes there being, look, there's a big tower sticking out of the wood. Maybe it wouldn't, maybe it would. I don't know. But they definitely finesse the terrain and the environment to allow for the way they have it, which is generally why you have kind of what it's like. It's almost like in a bowl of mountains, and then you can always find these high points and look down over a valley that's really sparse. Like I don't remember there being any real forests in Zelda. Yeah, there are some trees here and there, but essentially it's almost like a shrubland or grassland or savanna where there's trees, but it's mostly grasses. So things are very easy to see. It doesn't work necessarily if you're in lots of hills and you can't get above to see and everything, right? So there are limits, and Zelda kind of constructs its game to give you this sense, but they're it doesn't necessarily work for all environments potentially. But we'll keep going. How to use it? There are 3 general types of locations for this technique: near, middle, and far. Far locations are things like mountain ranges, large cities, and forests. Middle locations are found while traveling, like caves, camps, or cabins. Near locations include what they can see from where they are. Examples include traveling merchants, a copse of trees, or a babbling brook. So this is where I'm not sure about this, because a cave, a camp, or a cabin to me is not a middle location. So if I'm getting this, it seems to be, what is the observable distance towards the thing? So what can you see from far away? Large cities, sure, I guess. I mean, I guess it depends, right? I think in fantasy sense, most people have massively, they'll have water deep and something big. I don't tend to have those. My cities are more like Edoras from Lord of the Rings than having like Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings, right? It's kind of small. I mean, Edoras is on a hill and there's plains, so sure you could see it from a long ways away, but it's not. You will lose sight of Edoras before you lose sight of like the Misty Mountains or something. So to me, I would put cities in the middle distance. Forests, maybe even if they're really far away, maybe you'd see that the dark line of trees. So maybe that would work. Definitely mountain ranges would be far, but a cave, a camp, or a cabin from middle. Ooh, I don't know. Like you can't see. I don't think you can see caves from like a middle distance. I mean, what kind of caves is this? Like there's holes all over I don't know. I feel like a cave is something. It's just weird because they define near as what you can see from where they are. And to me, a cave, a camp, or a cabin is definitely things you can see from where you are. They're not things that you're going to get much. I don't know. So they kind of lost me a little bit. Just how are they defining that? So I guess we'll keep reading. But I'm not sure that definition, or I'm not sure if it's the definition that's off or just my concept that's maybe not jiving with how they see those things. But in any case, it seems like near is what you can see from where you are. Then middle, I'm not sure, because I would think everything is what you can see. But maybe middle is there are traces of it. I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to keep reading. I'm not sure about that. But let me not get bogged down. Let's keep going, and then we'll see how we get. Okay, so we got those examples, right? All right, use active descriptions of locations so the PCs can take charge of their exploration. They should discover middle locations that are side quest length. No more than a full session unless you're into that. As they travel, far landmarks like the tall mountains can keep the characters on the right path. Okay, so middle locations that they can discover. So they have to do some. Okay, so I think what they're saying now, see, maybe their wording is kind of weird. Near locations are what is observable to them in their area. Far locations are basically your geographical landmarks. Big things keep you situated. Lonely Mountain is to our left. All right, we just keep Lonely Mountain to our left. They're guideposts, unless you're heading to the mountain. But in other words, all right, keep it to the left. Middle stuff is, I guess, near enough that it's approachable. So you're thinking, okay, the Lonely Mountain is distant. We're not getting there anytime soon, but we can see it. All right. But we can't. And then the middle locations are ones that are discoverable, but not observable. So we have to do some stuff to find them. Whereas the stuff that's immediately observable is the stuff that's kind of right in front of our eyes. I think maybe I have that correctly now. Let's see there. I don't know if this is, let's see this. I guess maybe it's an example. Imagine the characters decide to follow the babbling brook instead of the road. It's possible the travelers up ahead are bandits in disguise. As they follow the river, they find an old cave that hides a shrine to an ancient deity. Continuing on, the ruins of an old castle come into view, so PCs take some time to explore. Among the ruins, they find old magic and undead entities. Good thing the mountains to the east are visible, so they can make sure they head in the right direction. All right, so the example here is the near locations. Babbling Brook was a near location. So they follow it, and it leads them. So they follow the brook, and following the brook, they discover an old cave, which is one of those middle locations. And then did they continue? I guess maybe they found the cave, but then they continue on, and now they find an old castle. Which is a far location. Okay. So, I mean, I guess this is a way of, this seems like kind of what they're saying is basically connecting these different locations together. So you have a location, it's a babbling brook. It's a brook, it's, river, right? Or a waterway. So the PCs now can follow the waterway, and they get to this other location, which is a cave. If they actually takes them to locations, the brook to the cave, and then presumably the brook continues on, and then they find the castle. They still have this landmark that's out there, which is the mountains to the east. So they're able to keep the mountains to the east kind of in their side. So at least they know in a certain bit, they know they were supposed to follow the mountains to do something. So now they know, keep following the mountains. In each of these cases, players will have plenty of ways to explore and learn about the world. Maybe they see interesting animals while following the brook. Maybe one of the PCs develops a connection with the lost goddess found at the cave shrine. Maybe later an NPC recognizes the sword found in the castle ruins. Learn what hooks the players the most and give it to them in the pieces while they explore. Tie these bits of info to the character to get them even more hooked. So this, I think, is a really good idea. I don't know if it's the way they're laying it out there. I almost it doesn't feel like 3-point because there's way more than 3 points here. But in any case, you're weaving sort of a tapestry in the world. All these different threads connecting all these other threads, which I think is a great idea. Hey, they find a sword in a ruined castle. Great. Well, they take that somewhere. Somebody recognizes that sword. Why wouldn't they? That castle has a history. That history might tie into that particular NPC or that town or both. And so now that can add more connections. What about that goddess in the cave? Is somebody still venerating that goddess? Is it truly forgotten? Are there advantages, disadvantages, consequences for a PC taking up the worship of that goddess if they tend to? Like, what does it mean? What does it do? How does that affect things? Like, these are all really good ideas, and they keep tying things together. Maybe the goddess is connected to the castle or connected to the town. There's other things. And thinking about how all these things connect together in ways that may be known or unknown, obviously, to the party, but obviously even to the people living in these villages or towns. There may be some in this deeper connection or older connection that relates to some past events. It's a great way for you to work in the lore of your world. Oh, this goddess used to be so-and-so, such and such, did something and such. Well, if somebody actually goes and prays at that altar and makes a offering, and what does that mean if she gets kind of reactivated to this backstory you had written up that might have been nice, but wasn't active in the world, but now this player is activated. So what does that do? What does it mean? All neat stuff. Okay, that was that part. Let's see. In cities, 3-point planning creates diverse districts with unique landmarks and points of interest. This makes it easier for players to explore by giving them options. Examples include a marketplace, a noble's neighborhood, or the docks if there is a port. Include 3 notable NPCs for each district that can act as quest givers, allies, or adversaries, giving them their own personalities, goals, and secrets so the players can find them engaging and intriguing. Prepare 3 popular landmarks in the city that could serve as points of interest. Examples include an ancient church dedicated to a main deity, an old library with hints of forbidden knowledge, or a network of underground tunnels run by the Thieves Guild. These landmarks give the players meaningful choices as well as opportunities for engagement. I still wouldn't really call this 3-point because it's not like you're preparing one of each, but they are definitely using rule of 3 here. All right, so let's get on to their reasoning here. Why use it? One reason to use a 3-point planning is to provide a structure for your session planning. By creating lists of 3, you will always have something interesting for the PCs to find and explore. These monuments and locations the PCs find are perfect places to include secrets and lore about your world. How are far-off events affecting day-to-day life? What civilizations rose and fell before the current ones in power? Were the current gods always favored? How old is the Emperor King anyways? Find the answers by exploring the world 3 points at a time. One difficulty of this might be that going backwards acts as a cop-out to your planning. It shouldn't be, and don't treat it as one, like one. Retreating should always be an option when the PCs are stuck or encounter something too powerful. Being flexible and ready to adapt to your players' decisions is an important skill for game masters. Lean into your players' choices and let them shape the story as they explore your fantastic world. I'm not sure why they would say going backwards as a difficulty or cop-out. I'm not sure I get that particular objection or particular potential objection that they're raising. Be careful when presenting many choices, as you don't always want to give the players too many. This is definitely true. This can cause them to waste time debating and analyzing each option. Incorporate time constraints to keep the story and momentum moving forward. Even though you are planning 3 points ahead, you don't need to plan every single detail in advance. It's okay and expected for you to leave room for improv and filling in gaps as needed at the table. Connect the players' choices and the locations explored in a meaningful way. Do this by tying them into the main story, the characters, or the themes of your campaign. If you notice a lack of player engagement, use clear goals, motivations, and context. Communication with your players is important so that you can understand their preferences. This can help you short-term and long-term by planning what interests them and making sure that everyone at the table is having fun. The goal is to create an enjoyable experience for the players and the dungeon master. Draw inspiration from the captivating world design of games like Legend of Zelda. Use 3-point planning in your sessions to enhance the exploration and engagement of your players. Okay, so it's basically a wrap. I think a couple of things. So, I mean, this is a fine article. I would have liked to have seen a little bit, just from an article standpoint, just from a reading standpoint. Oh, Rolling With Us. Sorry, it's from the, hold on a minute. I'll try to, like I said, I'll go back and I'll put this in the show notes, but this is from the pointsofinspiration.com blog. It's actually a little bit old. Not old. It's from July 26th. Called 3-point planning, or how to session prep like a Zelda game. I think just from an educational standpoint, I would have liked a little more tying back to what Zelda actually does, because I think that it's just the jumping off point. So I think in general, this idea of thinking of things in depth, or at least that's how I'm kind of thinking about it. You have observable, discoverable, and distant. The distant things are almost constants for whatever region you're in. Now, like I said before, some of the stuff's going to be situational. In Zelda games, the world is laid out to give you these big landmarks that are pretty much always visible. Those, what they call them, Zilka, I forget, those towers you can climb up. And because you're always looking at Hyrule is always this bowl from these mountains kind of downward, and then these towers popping out. And essentially the foliage coverage over the world is very scattered. So you don't have any areas where you just can't look around and find a tower. You always have great visibility to one of these things that's sticking up. And I think maybe an interesting thing that people, I'll say this. One of the things I think is interesting about the Zelda games that I don't think anyone has taken the time to point out. I haven't seen it. Maybe I should write it up. Is that the artificiality of the place doesn't matter. Maybe there's some place in the Cartographers Guild where people are ripping apart the Legend of Zelda maps and the way the overworld looks, and her over rivers doing this or that, or no place is built like this. Ha ha ha. This doesn't make sense at all. Nobody cares. Nobody goes to the Legend of Zelda games complaining about why the landscape isn't perfectly natural to Earth-like conditions. Nobody cares. And I think that would be something that I would like to tell people, because people get so caught up in critiquing other people's maps about how Earth-like or not Earth-like they are, and the critiquers and the people who feel very sensitive to those critiques. People play these Legend of Zelda games or Skyrim or any of the other games, Elder Scrolls games or Lord of the Rings. Nobody cares about how much they deviate from Earth-like in terms of geology, and whatnot. Obviously, if they behave like the moon and look like the moon, people are like, oh, it's the moon. But after that, they'd be playing anyway. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Okay. Magnus says normalize rivers flowing backwards. Exactly. Nobody cares. So that would be the big thing I think that people, maybe it's overlooked, is the terrain. If you actually look at it, it's highly artificial in the Legend of Zelda games, and it doesn't matter. So I would say when you're looking at your maps, do what you want to do. When people get down there and ground level and play, they're not going to care. Nobody cares. Okay, that's probably the big thing. That's probably the biggest thing. But in terms of a lot of our worlds, the issue is when you're trying to map this stuff from the Zelda games onto our worlds, is our worlds probably don't have the type of terrain that Zelda has and the type of things that Zelda has, because Zelda also has backstory for why those towers are poking up really high and why kind of things are the way they are. There, it does. It's not like it's not explained in the lore of Zelda. It is. It is explained, but you may not want to have big giant towers to do that. So Magnus says Redditors and YouTubers can cope and seethe. Absolutely. Right. Like Magnus says, no reasons for it. No magic, just does. Simple as. Yeah. You know, and even if it, you know, is like, yeah, a god's body fell here. That's why. Like, it doesn't matter. Nobody, like I said, nobody cares. Now, when you look at a game like Zelda, now you're trying to map this thing onto your game. Well, my world doesn't look like Zelda's world, and I don't have towers that are sticking up. It's really obvious. And in our real world, depending on where you are, there isn't always a giant mountain to look at. If you're in the you're leaving, let's say you're playing a Lord of the Rings game, there's a big, yeah, sure, you have the Misty Mountains, you have the Lonely Mountain, you have these big, but there's a lot of area you can get into where you're not going to just see the Misty Mountains in the background. It's like you're exiting the Shire, let's say. It's like, yeah, you can see the old forest ahead of you, great. But once you're in the old forest, you can't see much, you can't see Bree, the Shire's gone, right? You don't have a landmark. And that's kind of part of some of the fun and tension in Hexcrawl, is that you have to lose sight of these big landmarks. Is you're gonna have to turn away from what you know and enter the unknown. You're not always going to keep the mountain to your left. And then when you're in a forest, even if there was a mountain, you got to do, you're gonna have to do a Bilbo, and you might have to climb up the top of some tall tree to hopes of seeing it, because you can't see it from the forest floor. The forest and other things, and you're going in valleys through some hills. Part of the whole challenge of that is it impedes your ability to observe. So you just have to be careful with, hey, how does my world work? How does Zelda work? Okay. But the idea of having things out there that you can kind of see to kind of tantalize and tempt your party, I think is a good one. And also the idea of kind of just giving it a basic outline. You don't need to flesh it out fully. Just have the babbling brook. And maybe you've had this idea that there's a cave if they follow the brook, but you're not worried about that. Maybe you have the note of, hey, if they follow the brook, it leads to a cave. But that's it. And then if they follow it, great. Then you kind of explore that area. If they don't, they don't. And then you could have connections, because the thing he makes a note about, oh, it's bad if don't worry about, backing up might be seen as bad, but it's not, I don't think, because you're making these connections between the places. So if the cave, let's say, relates to the castle, it's not a one-way connection. The castle relates to the cave. So maybe they don't find the cave because they don't follow the babbling brook, but they find the castle. And the castle maybe leads in some way, maybe following the brook the other way, or some other path that leads to the cave, because the worship of the goddess in the cave was related to the people who lived in the castle. So you're setting up this kind of tapestry of points. There's not one path that leads to it. It's not linear. It's not one directional. It's, you can come from many different ways, meaning you can get there in many different ways. So if they go up one way and then back up, or they don't go another way, well, don't worry about it. They might hit it from another angle you don't suspect. But ultimately, I do think it's a good maybe way to think about it, is like, look at things, think of, to look at what's observable, and maybe think about, like, okay, for people looking with hexes and hex crawling and hex maps, we're always looking at like how much to prep. So you can maybe think about, right, I like, rules of 3 are good because 3 is a good number. So what's observable, what's discoverable, and then maybe what's a landmark, are kind of 3 things. Not always going to be a landmark. So maybe we think of a different word or something else, right? Maybe it's the thing itself, like the forest is itself the place. So maybe that's not the 3rd thing, should be something else. But maybe we think about, well, what's observable, and then maybe 2 things that are discoverable, right? Or do you feel like observable, discoverable, and secret might be another thing? But I think thinking about that, instead of this near, far, this far, middle, near, which they're used in different ways, so it doesn't totally make sense because it's not a thing about distance, really. I think you're thinking about it as what can you observe, what can you discover, and then maybe the third thing, maybe not even a third thing, I don't know. But I think that's a good way to try to figure things out. And then when you prep, come up with a few things that are observable, or maybe even just one thing that's observable for a given hex, or maybe two, I don't know, whatever you like. It depends on the size of the hex and how much time you have. And then maybe come up with what can you discover, and then tie the discoverables to those observables. So the Babbling Brooks is discoverable. Where does it lead to? It leads to, in the example they gave, it leads to two discoverables, the ruined castle and the cave. Great. Maybe there's even some further thing that you could find if you figure out the first two parts. Like if you took the sword to the shrine, maybe something else happens. Oh, you can work that in there. Like, what if the hilt of the sword had an image of that goddess? And now, depending on how you work it out, if you figure either you go to the cave, you see the goddess, then you go to the ruins of the castle, and you find the sword. Maybe there's some other enigmatic thing in the cave, and now you've seen this goddess in the cave. Then you see the goddess in the sword. Maybe you put something together. You decide to take the sword back to the cave. Maybe something happens, gives you the secret. Right? That could be one way to do it. So maybe something like that. But it's a good way to think about your prep, I think, ultimately, if that makes any sense. Ian says there's a portal to the plane of anti-gravity at the top of the mountain that's been sucking up all the water from the ocean for millennia. I like it. It could be one of those portals, and you don't have to be anti-gravity, just a plane of water, because maybe the plane of water, we often think of water coming out. There's no reason that a portal couldn't be sucking water in. There you go. Magnus says, another idea, water doesn't necessarily flow to oceans, but toward the closest point of transition to the elemental plane of water. Bam, right there. And Magnus also likes the image of a mountain shrouded in backwards rain as the runoff flows through the portal. Yeah, that is cool. Oh, Ian says, maybe water isn't really water, but elemental spirits who are just trying to find their way home. Well, that's kind of sweet. Very sweet. All right, folks. Well, I'm gonna wrap it here. Ooh. Pew. Pew. All right. Well, I'm glad to be back in the salad again. Thanks, folks, for hanging out. I will update the show notes, the description, with these links, these particular articles. I'm going to try to I do this for a while and then I fall the habit just because it takes time and I don't always have to cut up and post separately the pieces on different articles for folks who don't want to. I know sometimes it's hard to get through all the streams. In this case, I'm almost running on 2 hours. So I know that means a lot of folks won't make it through all this. So I'll try to do that, but forgive me if I don't. But you guys were here for it, so you already heard it. Have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. I'm not sure what my schedule will be this week. It may still be a little up and down. We'll see as I get settled in and get back to the swing of it. But I'm happy to be back. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Hey, Magnus, have a great rest of your afternoon. And you out there, same. Have a great rest of whenever. If you give a thumbs up on your way out, that'll be awesome. If you found yourself in here and you enjoyed this and you're not subscribed to the channel and you feel like subscribing, that'd also be awesome. But other than that, folks, game on, everybody. And I will talk to you later. Bye now.